So yeah, I mean, online marketing, probably a lot of you have felt at some point, if that was your role at all in your company or for you individually, there's so many options it can be overwhelming. It does feel like a big, powerful river sometimes that you can get into and drown. In fact, probably some of you have had one of two experiences, I would imagine. Either you heard or read something by an expert in online marketing that was an expert on one specific area and ended up feeling guilty that you weren't spending enough time, right? So maybe it was a Facebook expert or a LinkedIn expert or a constant contact expert, and they talked about how you should be spending more time doing that thing. Well, in reality, what happens is you end up feeling kind of guilted into spending more time on it, even when it's not necessarily a good match for you and your organization, and you end up getting burnt out. Or on the flip side, you may have seen someone else that was experiencing a lot of success in one of those platforms, and you thought, well, you know, I don't have the time they do, I don't have the skills they do, I can't get what they do out of that platform. Well, what we're going to look at today is that can help with both of those issues is your point of optimization. So your point of optimization is the return you get on your resources invested. So whether that's time, whether that's money, whether that's manpower, whether it's staffing in your company, whatever that looks like, it's where you've optimized that return. So if you think of a graph, some graphs go straight up like this, right? But that's not how it always works. If you spend, let's pretend that return on investment on social media, for example, was really easy to measure, right? Let's take Facebook. Everybody have a Facebook account here? I assume so, since everyone was taking selfies earlier. But let's say on Facebook that you spend an hour a week on Facebook for your business, and you get one lead or one piece of business a month out of that. Well, it does not necessarily follow that 2 hours will get you 2 leads, 3 hours will get you 3 leads, and so on. Typically, there's a drop-off. So the point of optimization is actually where you've optimized the amount of time, money, resources you're spending before you start experiencing that drop-off in effectiveness. So there are 4 things that factor into your point of optimization. Number 1 is the audience, right? So you have to know who is on a specific platform, and you have to know for your business who makes a good fit, right? You guys have probably heard different terms like ideal client, ideal prospect, target audience. You guys heard all those terms before? So you have to know that for your own business. And if your definition of who would be the best fit for you includes phrases like anyone that or everybody who, then it's not specific enough, right? I would challenge you to think about psychographics and demographics. So you're probably familiar with demographics. Demographics are things like if you're B2C, how old are my clients, my ideal customers, what's their age range, what's their income level, where do they live? Right? And if you're B2B, it could be things like annual revenue, industry, years in business, may even include who the decision maker is for what you provide. So that's demographics. Psychographics is a lot more psychological, right? As the name kind of implies a little bit. That's more, whether you're B2B or B2C, it's the people involved. What do they like? What are their hobbies? Are they politically active? Right? Do they go to church? Do they volunteer? What are their interests beyond just that demographic type information? So know those things about your audience, and then you'll need to find out those things about whatever platform you're considering as well. The second thing that you want to look at is the capabilities, right? How well do the capabilities of the platform match up with the capabilities that your organization needs? So, for example, if you have a highly detailed custom service that you provide, on the capabilities front, that might not work well with Twitter, right? Or if you have a highly visual product that you need to show people or you need to demonstrate for people and they have to see how it works, something like an audio podcast would not be the best fit, right? Because you can't see anything in an audio podcast. Confidentiality issues, right? If they're obviously if you're have an event like this with a lot of people there, that can be a great opportunity to take pictures and share on Facebook, on Instagram, different sites like that. But Instagram, if there's confidentiality issues, some nonprofits especially will have issues with confidentiality. Instagram may not be the best fit at that point. So know what capabilities your organization needs and what capabilities the platform supports. So audience capabilities. The third thing is culture fit, right? Culture fit. So an easy way to look at this is formal versus informal. So probably a lot of you are in cultures that are fairly informal. Some of you are probably in cultures that are fairly formal. From a culture fit standpoint, LinkedIn would be better fit for formal organizations, right? It's very corporate. Whereas sites like Twitter or Facebook tends to be much less formal, and so that would be a good fit for more informal organizations. Of course, it's a lot more than just formal or informal. It's a lot about your company culture, what kind of things your organization does. If you think about those psychographic things for your company, what does that look like in there? And you need to know then, of course, what the platform looks like as well. So the fourth thing, and this is the one that a lot of the experts ignore, is just comfort level, right? How comfortable are you actually on the platform that you're looking at? So assuming all three other things are equal, let's say you're comparing Facebook and Twitter, and you look at them and you're way more comfortable on Twitter than you are on Facebook, or what tends to be more common, on Facebook than you are on Twitter. Well, that's going to affect which one you get more mileage out of. It's going to affect where your point of optimization is on that graph. And so the big thing to keep in mind with those is you've got to balance all four of them, right? You can't just look at one thing and ignore all the rest. So my company, for example, is B2B. So from a B2B standpoint, a lot of the decision makers for what we do, for the online marketing services we provide, are more concentrated on LinkedIn than they are on Facebook. But our company culture is a lot less formal than what you typically see on LinkedIn. So we have to balance that and decide which of those we want to spend more time on. In our case, we decided to spend slightly more time on Facebook than we do on LinkedIn. But you have to look at all four factors. So in fact, how these actually play in, because when you're first starting out, a lot of that can be kind of a guess maybe. Maybe you can do some research. But there are three things you can do to decide which, if you're looking at a new platform or looking at all the platforms you could possibly consider, what are the three things that you can do to decide which one's a good fit for you? So the first thing you need to do, and probably you guys have heard this saying before, but people do business with those they know, like, and trust. And I like to add value as well because, for example, easy example of that, if there's a roofer, I know him, I like him and trust him, but I don't own any property that has roofs, then there's not a lot of value I place in that for me personally. So people do business with those they know, like, trust, and value. And so when you look at a new tool or a new platform, just ask yourself, is there potential that this will help my target audience know, like, trust, and value me and my organization? And if there's not, then go ahead and throw it out. If you think maybe there is, then you move on to the second step, which is research. So start looking into it, look online, ask friends, ask experts, ask other people with experience on those platforms. Do research to get your best guess for the four components, for the audience, the capabilities, the culture fit, and your comfort level. But ultimately, that's just a guess, so you want to move on to the third step, if it still makes sense, which is actually try it out on a personal basis, right? So sign up for a platform with a personal account, not a corporate account, and just connect with people and start listening. Listen, watch, see what they do, how they conduct themselves, get a feel for the answer to those four different elements, and then if it makes sense, jump in and start interacting. That helps you evaluate your comfort level. And then if it still makes sense, go ahead and sign up for an organizational account for your organization. And then you can evaluate and look and see, hey, does this make sense for me? Is it an audience fit? Is it a culture fit? Is it a capabilities fit? And is it a comfort level fit for me? And that should help you get through the two big questions, the two big frustrations people have, which is just that they're not getting as much as they could out of a platform, or that someone else is getting more than they are. So I went really fast, I know. What questions do you guys have on that or anything online marketing related? I can't guarantee I'll have an answer because the river is deep. Yes?
Where is a good starting point to determine your demographics or your psychographics?
Yep, so demographics and psychographics, one exercise you can do, since I would assume that all of you here are already in business or starting up and going, is look at maybe the top 10 or so customers or clients you have that you really like and or make money off of, ideally both, right? Ideally you make a decent amount of money off of them and you like them. and just start listing out all their demographic information and psychographic information and see where the overlap is. And then a lot of times you can go after that overlap as your actual market. I know in B2B, a lot of times people will just look at services as an example. They'll just look at industries. What industry are these businesses in? You need to look at the whole picture, right? But see where your best clients and best customers are already at and what they share in common, and that can be a good starting point to jumpstart you. Yes, Dave. We have not done that for our clients yet. We actually go through this process and look at those 4 components when any new platform comes online to decide for our target market as a whole, is this a good thing for us to invest in? And so we're almost kind of multiplying the process, so it gets a lot more complicated. But we look at, does this make sense for something that we really need to start experimenting with? And so we'll either, we take one of 2 approaches. Either if it's not a great match, but we feel like we should know more about it, we'll very casually and maybe just stay on that personal level that I talked about. But if it makes more sense that it would be a good match potentially, then we'll kind of dive all in from a professional standpoint and get our organization in there. And so we have not, for our demographics, our target audience, it hasn't made a lot of sense for us to do much with Snapchat yet. Yes? Right. So you're asking. Let me make sure I understand this. You're asking when your target market is kind of split, basically. Okay. So that's not uncommon. Sometimes it's commercial and residential. Sometimes it's like with nonprofits. It can be the recipient of services and the donors and volunteers and that sort of thing. So it is not uncommon at all. What we recommend people do is go one of 2 routes, whatever makes sense for them. Some organizations will literally split their branding. Right, so they'll have a residential brand and they'll have a corporate brand, for example, with our commercial brand. But most of the time, what happens is they just do a good balance. And so maybe, like if you're talking social media, for example, one thing they might do is have 2 updates a day, every day, and decide that they're going to plan that ahead of time, and that the morning update is always related to like the commercial, and the afternoon update is always related to the residential, and then maybe on weekends they only do residential, maybe not. But having that recipe and then sticking to it for several months, see how it seems to be working for you, establish some metrics that you actually look at, and if it's working well, great. If you want to tweak it and experiment a few more months and then see how that affects those numbers. But the key is to be consistent over a period of time and not just make changes kind of randomly. Is that helpful? Okay. Other questions? Yes. Well, so let me make sure I understand what you're kind of asking there. There are a lot of options, and so most of the time, most of us are not starting from nothing. We've maybe tried different things. Maybe we've tried some platforms and abandoned them. And so how do you kind of clean up from that? So the first step is always planning. So there's a saying, you have to slow down to speed up. So just take a step back, plan a couple hours, 3-4 hours, however many you need to set aside, and actually plan your strategy. What do you want to do on a consistent basis? What platforms match, and what frequency do you want to do? And then likely that will include a timeline of, okay, we're not going to use platform X, maybe we're not going to use Snapchat. Maybe we tried Snapchat out and decided not to use it. What am I going to go through and actually delete? And so most of the platforms out there, there are instructions for deleting, because it's not always intuitive. A lot of times you do have to actually look up how to delete them. But the key is to set aside some time for planning. One of my pet peeves with most social, especially the social network sites, is they do make it so easy to set up and get going that it's easy to do that without having any plan at all. This is just like any other business thing. You should have a plan. Just because it's free doesn't mean you don't need to invest time in actually coming up with your plan, formulating that, and being consistent. So that's the key, is just take some time, step back, actually look at big picture of everything you're doing, what is going to help people know, like, trust, and value your organization, and then get rid of the rest, and just set some time aside to actually do that. Social media is a tool. And so some people, for example, some organizations, social media is not right for. Some organizations, a website. I have talked with businesses, not a lot, but a few businesses where I said, no, you don't need to invest in a website even. And so there are businesses out there that don't need all of these things, heaven forbid. Again, something most experts would not tell you. But you don't need all these things under the sun. They're all tools, and so they all make different sense in different situations. For example, if you're not going to be able to be consistent on social media and update on a regular basis and check in, then don't get on it for your business. Don't do it. It's okay to, who cares if you're doing it personally? That's different. But if you're doing it for your business and you can't be consistent on it, then don't even do it. So it's just another tool. You can have paid advertising on social media as well, so that's a whole nother area. But make sure you look at it as a tool, just like anything else. And now some of those may be, here's a bunch of Swiss Army knives that you didn't have before, but they are still essentially just tools that you can use for advertising and marketing, getting the word out about your organization. All right, thank you very much.